Getting into hi-fi can be exciting, but it can also become incredibly confusing. The moment you start researching audio, you suddenly hear about expensive cables, amplifier specifications, DACs, streaming formats, speaker upgrades, burn-in, and countless rules about what you supposedly must do to get great sound. And that's where many new audiophiles start wasting money. The truth is, building a great hi-fi system doesn't have to be complicated. Some things genuinely matter, while others receive far more attention than they deserve. So today, we're looking at 7 things new hi-fi audiophiles worry about way too much, and what you should actually focus on instead. One of the first things new audiophiles often become obsessed with is speaker cable. You start looking at different brands, and suddenly you can find cables costing more than some complete amplifiers. And because expensive hi-fi equipment is all about getting the best possible sound, it's easy to assume that spending more on cable must automatically mean getting better audio. But this is where you need to slow down. A good speaker cable absolutely needs to be properly constructed, reliable, and appropriate for your system. But once you've got a quality cable with suitable gauge, good connections, and the correct length, spending dramatically more doesn't necessarily become the most important upgrade you can make. For example, something like the AudioQuest Rock 11 can be used as an example of a premium speaker cable. But if you're a new audiophile with a limited budget, your money may be much better spent on speakers, room placement, or acoustic improvements first. The biggest mistake isn't buying a good cable. It's worrying about the cable before you've optimized the rest of the system. Another mistake is believing that you need an expensive amplifier before you can have a serious hi-fi system. This idea can make the hobby feel completely out of reach for beginners. But amplifier price alone doesn't determine whether a system will sound good. What matters is whether the amplifier is appropriate for speakers, whether it has enough power for your listening needs, and whether the overall system is properly matched. A compact amplifier, such as a Foci Audio V3, is a good example of why beginners shouldn't automatically assume that a small or affordable amplifier is useless. You don't necessarily need a giant amplifier sitting in a massive equipment rack just to enjoy detailed music. Instead, start with your actual requirements. What speakers are you using? How large is your room? How loudly do you listen? What connections do you need? Answer those questions first. Then choose the amplifier. That's a much smarter approach than simply assuming that the most expensive amplifier must sound the best. The next thing beginners often worry about is the source. You start researching digital audio and quickly discover streamers that cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Then you start thinking, maybe my system isn't good enough because I'm using an affordable streamer. But streaming doesn't automatically become better simply because the box costs more. A product like the WM Pro Plus shows how compact, affordable streaming hardware can provide features that would have seemed incredibly impressive in much more expensive equipment years ago. For most listeners, the important questions are much simpler. Does the streamer support the services you actually use? Does it provide the connections your system needs? Is the software reliable? Does it integrate properly with your amplifier and DAC? If the answer is yes, you may already have everything you need. Instead of immediately spending thousands on a streamer, put your money toward the parts of the system that will make a more meaningful difference for your particular room and speakers. Here's another trap that catches almost every new audiophile at some point: obsessing over specifications. You start comparing amplifier power ratings, distortion numbers, frequency response charts, signal-to-noise ratios, DAC specifications, and every other number you can find. And specifications are useful, but only when you know what they actually mean. Take something like the Yamaha AS501. Looking at its specifications can tell you useful information about its capabilities, but those numbers alone can't tell you exactly how your complete system will sound in your room. Your speakers, listening distance, room acoustics, placement, source material, and personal preferences all matter. Specifications should help you understand equipment. They shouldn't become the entire reason you choose it. The goal isn't to build the most impressive spreadsheet. The goal is to build a system that sounds great when you're actually sitting down and listening to music. This one can quietly become the most expensive mistake of all. You buy an amplifier, then you wonder whether another amplifier would sound better. So you upgrade, then you start thinking about a new DAC, then a new streamer, then different speakers. And suddenly you're spending more time shopping for equipment than actually listening to music. A product like the Marantz PM6007 is a good reminder that a well-designed component can remain perfectly useful even when newer products appear. You don't need to replace equipment simply because something newer has been released. If your amplifier works properly, matches your speakers, has the features you need, and you enjoy your music, that's already a strong reason to keep it. Upgrade because you have identified a genuine limitation, not because the internet convinced you that your current equipment is suddenly obsolete. The best hi-fi system isn't necessarily the one with the newest equipment. It's the one that makes you want to sit down and listen. Another common beginner mistake is assuming that bigger speakers automatically mean better sound. It sounds logical. Bigger cabinet, bigger drivers, more bass, so they must be better, right? Not necessarily. The right speaker depends heavily on your room. A large floor-standing speaker placed in a small room may create problems that a well-designed bookshelf speaker simply doesn't. Placement, distance from walls, listening position, room acoustics, and bass behavior can all affect what you actually hear. This is why choosing speakers based purely on size can be a mistake. A smaller speaker that is properly positioned in a suitable room can deliver a much more enjoyable experience than a huge speaker that's fighting against a room. So don't ask, which speaker is bigger? Ask, which speaker works better in my room? That question will take you much further. And finally, this may be the biggest mistake of all, believing every audiophile rule you hear online. You'll find people saying you absolutely need a certain cable. Someone else will tell you that a particular amplifier is the only way to get good sound. Another person will tell you that a DAC completely transformed their system. And someone else will insist that you need to spend thousands before you're even allowed to call yourself an audiophile. Here's the problem. There is no universal hi-fi system that works perfectly for everyone. Your room is different. Your speakers are different. Your music is different. Your budget is different. And most importantly, your ears and your preferences are different. Use reviews and measurements to learn. Use experienced audiophiles as a source of ideas. But don't turn somebody else's preference into an absolute rule. The best thing you can do is understand why something matters. Test in your own system when possible, and decide whether the improvement is actually meaningful to you. Because at the end of the day, hi-fi isn't supposed to be a competition over who owns the most expensive equipment. It's supposed to make music more enjoyable. So those are 7 things new hi-fi audiophiles worry about far more than they should. The biggest lesson is simple. Don't let the hobby become an endless cycle of fear, comparison, and unnecessary upgrades. Start with good speakers. Match your amplifier properly. Set up your room carefully. Use reliable cables and sources. And most importantly, listen to your system instead of constantly worrying about what the internet says you should buy next, because the best hi-fi upgrade isn't always the most expensive one. Sometimes, it's simply learning how to get the most out of what you already own. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more hi-fi guides, audiophile myths, equipment rankings, and honest audio advice.